Hello, back here for part two, lecture for unemployment, and we're going to start out by talking about some of the reasons that the unemployment rate may underrepresent the unemployment situation conditions in the country. So look at some of maybe the criticisms of the unemployment rate being lower than maybe it should be. And so the BLS ignores the prison population, in which many of these people who would have been out there not in prison would have trouble finding employment. And so I went on to the U.S. Department of Justice site and I found some data here about the people who are currently in prison. 57% of all state inmates had a high school diploma or its equivalent or higher. 31% of all jailed inmates had grown up with a parent or guardian who abused alcohol or drugs. About 12% had lived in a foster home or some type of institution. 46% had a family member who had been incarcerated, and more than 50% of the women in jail said they had been physically or sexually abused in the past. The reason why I mention this is that it shows that these people in prison have essentially a lot of very serious issues. That if they were out there not in prison trying to find employment, it might be difficult for them to first of all find employment, and second of all to keep the job. A lot of people don't have the fundamental job skills necessary to keep their job. And so these people have a lot of issues, a lot of baggage, a lot of history, and they need a lot of help. And by keeping them in prison, we provide probably little help at all, and we also are probably hiding a big part of unemployment that we would have in this country if we didn't keep so many people in prison. And we do have a lot of people in prison. We keep more people in prison than anyone. This is data here that's a few years old, and this looks at the prison population per 100,000 people. So in the United States, we have 737 people in prison for every 100,000 population. China has 118, Russia has 615, just a sample of other countries here. Brazil has 195. Sorry about that. Back to prison population, and so the U.S. has, again, the point here is that we have a larger share of our population in prison than any other nation, so there's something definitely wrong with what is happening in the United States. It probably is traced back to the 1980s with Ronald Reagan, war on drugs, continued with President Clinton in the 90s, and we've just thrown people in prison right and left, much more than any other nation on earth. Look at a country like maybe Japan, they have 62. Scotland, 134. Northern Ireland, 79. Ukraine, even Ukraine, kind of lawless area, 350. And so I've traveled in places in Europe, and I felt very comfortable. So keeping all these, walking the streets, keeping all these people in prison does not make me feel any safer than being in other nations where they have a much lower percent of the population in prison. So one reason why the current number of 8.4% might be too low is, again, we're keeping people who would normally make the number higher in prison more so than other nations. Another reason is that we have a situation known as underemployment. Underemployment is not mentioned in your book, but it's something you should know for the exams. Underemployment is caused by two reasons: people working fewer hours than desired, so this would be your part-time employees, or people working at one job while possessing the skills and the desire for a different job. So again, an example of a person gets a bachelor's in English and they're working at Walmart. Need their education and skill. At JV College, we have a lot of part-time faculty teaching classes that many of you might be taking. And these people, not all of them, but some desire a full-time job. But right now, it's hard to get full-time jobs due to the pandemic and budget problems. There's very, very little hiring going on right now in higher education in California or across the country. In fact, there are a lot of colleges who are cutting back on faculty right now. Now, the problem here is that people are counted as fully employed if they work 1 hour for pay during the survey week or 15 hours of no pay in a family-run business. These people might desire full jobs that have full-time pay, full-time hours, which gives you full-time pay and gives you benefits as well. But there's no offset here. They're counted. It's either one or the other. It's either you're unemployed or you're fully employed, where maybe there should be some number in the middle that says you're partial, maybe 50% unemployed, 50% employed. And so again, the unemployment rate treats these people as fully employed, when maybe there should be some partial offset. So in the States, 8.4% of the labor force is unemployed, when maybe there's 6.5% of those people who are considered employed who prefer to have a full-time job but cannot find one. Then we have workers who are discouraged. We talked about these workers. These people want jobs. They are hurting. They're unemployed. They just have given up. So just because you're discouraged, it doesn't mean the problem has gone away. So if more workers became discouraged and gave up looking, that actually would make the unemployment rate go down, because they would fall out of the numerator and as well as the denominator, but that would make the numerator fall by a higher percentage, and that would bring down the unemployment rate. In the August 2020 job report that just came out, there were 3.7 million people less in the labor force than there were in February 2020. So what's happened since the pandemic hit is that 3.7 million people have left the labor force and have not returned. If those people are added into the labor force as unemployed right now, the rate would be over 10% instead of it being 8.4%. So the problem there is that by leaving them out, it has the unemployment rate being lower than maybe what it should be. On the other side, there are a few reasons that the unemployment rate may represent unemployment conditions. One is the underground economy. We talked about this with GDP. And so many people employed in a criminal profession are not counted as employed. Well, you may argue well they shouldn't, but I would say if you're employed, you're employed. But many people employed in a legitimate profession, many hide that unemployment for tax reasons or because they're collecting unemployment benefits at the same time. Now, this is probably a problem in our nation to some degree. It's probably a lot worse in a nation like Spain or Italy. When Spain says their unemployment rate is 20%, don't believe that, because again, a lot of their people are working, just not reporting it. We have some of that, but not nearly equal to a lot of other nations. These people are known as phantom unemployment, right there. Not in your textbook, but know that for the exams. Phantom unemployment is used to describe those people who are not counted as unemployed but are actively gainfully employed. It could also be ones who are lying to collect unemployment benefits and they're not looking for work. So these are people who are counted as unemployed currently in the figures right now, but should not be. And then we have spouses who may provide many hours of important work, or do provide many hours of important work, but they're not picked up as being employed because they're not being paid. And so if they were added in to the figures being employed, that would make the number come down quite a bit, because they'll be added in the denominator but not the numerator. Next topic is to talk about reasons for being unemployed, and those are the types of unemployment. And I'll stop there.